The trade outpost smelled of rust, old oil, and too many bodies packed in one place. Ethan Cross stepped off his small cargo ship, the Silver Wren, carrying nothing but a datapad and the hope of finding work. His boots echoed on the metal floor. As he walked through the crowded market, vendors shouted in different languages, trying to sell everything from strange fruits to used ship parts. He kept his head down, weaving through the crowd. It was just another stop, another day, nothing special, at least, that's what he thought. Something small slammed into his leg. He stopped, looking down, a tiny alien girl, no more than 8 years old, stood there. Her silver eyes were wide, her clothes torn and dirty. She grabbed his hand like it was the only safe thing in the galaxy. And then she whispered one word, her voice trembling but certain. "Dad." Ethan froze. The market noise seemed to fade. He stared at her, confused. "I think you've got the wrong guy." "Kid," he said softly. But she only clung tighter. The way her little fingers curled around his made something twist inside his chest. Around them, people had stopped to watch. Some looked surprised, others angry. A few began whispering words he didn't understand from the corner of his eye. Ethan saw 2 armored guards pushing through the crowd. The girl's grip tightened, her eyes darting to the soldiers. "They're coming," she whispered. "Please don't let them take me." The guard stopped in front of Ethan. "She's not yours, human," one said coldly. "Step away before you cause trouble." Ethan frowned. "She just grabbed me out of nowhere." He said, "I don't know what's going on." The second guard smirked. "You will, soon enough." The girl hid behind Ethan's legs, shaking. He could feel her fear like it was leaking into him. The first guard reached for her arm, but Ethan stepped in front, blocking him without thinking. "You're not taking her until I get some answers," he said. A few gasps came from the crowd. The second guard's smirk vanished. "You don't understand the law here, human," he growled. "She called you father, in public, in front of witnesses." Ethan blinked. "So," he asked. The guard leaned closer. "In her people's culture, that's a binding claim. You're now responsible for her, and that means she's under your protection. Or your ownership." The words hit Ethan hard. Ownership. The girl's small hand squeezed his. She looked up at him with a pleading expression. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "You are my dad now." The crowd murmured louder. The guards exchanged glances, clearly unhappy. Finally, the first guard stepped back. "We'll be watching you," he said. "Don't try to run, or you'll both regret it." The guards left, and the crowd slowly went back to their business. Ethan knelt down to the girl's level. "Okay, kid," he said quietly. "What's your name?" She hesitated, then whispered Lyra. Her voice was so soft he almost missed it. "All right." "Lyra," Ethan said. "Why did you call me that? Why me?" She didn't answer. Instead, her silver eyes filled with tears. "Because you stopped." She said, "No one else stops." Ethan stood there, not sure what to say. Something about the way she said it made him feel responsible. He sighed. "Come on," he said. "You can stay on my ship for now. But just until we figure this out." Her face lit up with relief. She nodded quickly. "Thank you, Dad." She whispered again. Ethan shook his head, but didn't correct her. They walked back toward the Silver Wren. People still glanced at them, some with curiosity, some with clear disapproval. Ethan didn't like the way a few of them seemed to be tracking his steps. The sooner they were in space, the better. As they reached the docking bay, Ethan felt a prickling on the back of his neck. Someone was watching them. He glanced around, but saw nothing. Once inside his ship, he sealed the hatch. Lyra sat quietly in the co-pilot's seat. Swinging her legs, Ethan sat at the controls, trying to decide what to do next. Then his console beeped. A message flashed across the screen. It was short, but it made his blood run cold. You have something that belongs to us. Human, return her, or we come for you. Ethan turned to look at Lyra. She stared back at him with wide, frightened eyes. Outside, the station lights glowed faintly through the cockpit window. Inside, Ethan felt the weight of a choice he hadn't asked for, but could no longer avoid. One thing was clear. This girl was in danger, and now, so was he. The Silver Wren drifted slowly away from the trade outpost. Ethan kept the engine slow to avoid drawing attention, but his mind was racing. The message still glowed on his console, each word heavy in his chest. You have something that belongs to us. It felt less like a warning and more like a threat. Lyra sat curled up in the co-pilot seat, hugging her knees. She hadn't spoken since they left the station. Ethan glanced at her. You want to tell me what's going on, kid? He asked gently. Her silver eyes flicked toward him. Then back to the floor they will follow, she whispered. They always follow. Ethan frowned. Who? The guards? That message sender? Lyra shook her head slowly. The clan, she said, her voice trembling. They want me back because I claimed you. Ethan leaned back, confused. Claimed me? What does that mean? Lyra took a deep breath, like she was about to say something important. In my people's law, she said softly, if a child calls someone father 3 times in public, in front of witnesses, it becomes true. You are my father now. Ethan stared at her. That's a tradition. Lyra shook her head. No, it's the law of claiming, she said. Old, ancient law. Before the wars, it is binding. Even if the blood is not shared, it means no one can take me from you. Unless you give me away. Ethan rubbed his face. And I'm guessing they're not happy about that. Lyra's lip trembled. They had plans, she whispered. They were going to sell me to a master on the inner worlds, Ethan felt. His jaw tightened. The thought made his stomach turn. All right, he said, his voice firmer now. If what you're saying is true, that means you're safer with me than anyone else. She looked up at him, hope flickering in her eyes. But it also means they'll do whatever it takes to make me give you up. He added. The hope dimmed a little. Ethan could see the fear creeping back in. He stood and walked to the storage compartment. Pulling out a blanket, he wrapped it around her small shoulders. You can stay here for now, he said, but you've got to tell me everything. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. She told him how she'd been living on the run for months, how the clan had been hunting her ever since her mother's ship was destroyed, and how she'd been hiding in the station's lower decks, waiting for anyone kind enough to stop. You were the only one, she whispered. Ethan felt the weight of her words. He didn't know why, but he knew he couldn't walk away from her now. Still, he needed more information. Who exactly are you, Lyra? He asked, her eyes lowered. I am nothing, she said at first. But after a pause, she added, I was supposed to be something. Before they took everything, before Ethan could ask more, the ship's sensors beeped. Multiple signals, fast and closing in. He cursed under his breath. They found us already. Lyra's eyes widened. They will try to force you. She said quickly, they will make you say, you give me away. Ethan's hands moved across the controls, preparing for evasive maneuvers. They can try, he muttered. The comms pinged, and a deep voice filled the cockpit. Pilot of the Silver Wren, you are carrying stolen property. Prepare to transfer E-Tor be destroyed. Ethan glanced at Lyra. I'm guessing it means you. She nodded, gripping the blanket tighter. Her whole body was trembling. Ethan took a breath. This is Captain Cross, he said into the comm, and you're not getting her. There was a long pause on the other end. Then the voice replied, calm but cold. Then you have chosen war. Outside the viewport, 3 black ships appeared, sliding into formation. They had sleek, predatory designs, and their weapons were already warming up. Lyra whispered, "They won't stop." Ethan's grip tightened on the controls. "Neither will I," he said. The engines roared, and the silver wren shot forward. Weaving through the debris field ahead, laser fire lit up the dark. Ethan's hands flew over the controls. Using every trick he knew to stay ahead, Lyra leaned forward, eyes sharp despite her fear. Left, then up. She called out suddenly. Ethan followed her instructions without question. A burst of enemy fire missed them by inches. He glanced at her. "How did you know they'd shoot there?" She didn't answer, just stared ahead with a strange intensity. They finally broke through the asteroid cluster, leaving the black ships behind for now. Ethan's heart pounded. He turned to Lyra. "All right, kid," he said. "I think it's time you tell me everything, because I have a feeling you're not just some random runaway." Lyra's silver eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something else there. Not just fear, but the weight of a secret too big for someone her age. She took a shaky breath. "My mother was the leader of our people," she said slowly. "I am the last princess." The words hung in the air like a spark before an explosion. Ethan knew, without a doubt, that his life had just gotten far more dangerous than he ever wanted. And that turning back was no longer an option. The silver wren floated in the cold black of space. Ethan had shut the engines down. Letting the ship drift, the stars outside were quiet, but the silence inside the cockpit was tense. Lyra sat beside him, still wrapped in the blanket, her silver eyes stared out at the void, but her mind seemed far away. Ethan checked the scanners again. No sign of the black ships. Still, he knew better than to believe they had given up. "They won't stop looking for you, will they?" he asked. Lyra shook her head slowly. "No," she whispered. "They will chase until they win. Or until they die." Ethan leaned back in his seat. "So that's the kind of people we're dealing with." His mind was already turning, searching for a way to lose them for good. But before he could speak, the scanner beeped, a faint signal. Then another. Then 3 more. He leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. "They've found us." Lyra's small hand clutched his arm. "They will try to trap you," she said quickly. "They're good at it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "They'll have to be better than me." He powered the engines, the hum filling the ship like a heartbeat. Outside, the black ships slid into view, their dark hulls catching faint starlight. There were more this time, 5 in total. They spread out, cutting off every escape path. The cum crackled. "Pilot of the silver wren, you cannot win," a voice said calmly. "Hand over the girl, and you live." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "She's not your girl," he replied. "She's my daughter." Lyra's head snapped toward him, surprise flashing across her face. Ethan didn't look at her. His focus was on the growing wall of ships ahead. The enemy didn't reply. Instead, the first wave of laser fire lit up the darkness. Ethan pulled the silver wren into a tight roll, diving between 2 incoming blasts. Lyra gasped as the ship shook. Her small voice cut through the alarms, "Write them down." Ethan obeyed without thinking. A barrage of shots passed harmlessly where they had been a moment ago. "How do you know where they're going to fire?" Ethan asked between maneuvers. Lyra's expression was strange focused, but almost distant. "I can feel it," she said simply. "They move like the ones who chased my mother." Ethan didn't have time to process that. He slammed the throttle forward, darting toward a dense asteroid field ahead. The black ships followed. Ethan weaved between massive spinning rocks, the silver wren scraping dangerously close. Metal groaned under the strain. A glancing shot from one of the hunters slammed into the port side, shaking the whole ship. "We can't keep this up forever," Ethan muttered. Lyra's eyes darted across the asteroids, their narrow gap, left side. She said, pointing. Ethan saw Etah's slit, barely wider than the ship. He aimed for it, without hesitation. The silver wren squeezed through. Chunks of rocks scraping the hull. One of the pursuing ships tried to follow. It didn't make it. The asteroid's edge tore through its side, sending it spinning into the dark. Ethan allowed himself a small grin. "One down," he said. Lyra didn't smile. "They will call for more," she whispered. By the time they emerged from the far side of the asteroid field, only to black. Ships were still following. The rest had lost them in the maze of rocks. Ethan checked the power levels low. They couldn't fight, not for long. "I know a place," he said, turning the ship toward a distant cluster of faint blue stars. Lyra looked at him. "Safe place." "Safer than here," he replied, "at least for a while." They flew in silence for hours. Lyra finally drifted to sleep in the co-pilot's seat, her small frame rising and falling with each breath. Ethan glanced at her now and then. She looked peaceful when she slept. It was hard to believe she was the cause of so much trouble. Harder still to believe that she was a princess. But Ethan knew enough about the galaxy to understand this much. A child like her wasn't just a symbol. She was power, and people would kill to control her. When they finally reached the blue star system, Ethan guided the silver wren toward a small moon with a pale surface. It was unmarked on most star maps. A forgotten mining outpost sat buried in its craters. Ethan had been here once before, long ago. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions. They landed quietly. Ethan shut down all systems except life support. He needed time to think, but before he could sit, Lyra stirred, her silver eyes met his. "You saved me again," she said softly. Ethan shrugged. "That's what dads do." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Lyra's face brightened. "You are my real dad now," she said. Her voice warm. Ethan opened his mouth to answer, but the proximity alarm screamed. The black ships had found them, faster than he'd thought possible. Lyra's face went pale. "They're here," she whispered. Ethan's heart pounded. The chase wasn't over. It had only just begun. The alarm blared through the silver wren. Red lights flashed across the cockpit, painting everything in warning colors. Ethan's hands flew over the controls, but he already knew there was no way to fly out without being seen. The black ships had landed in the moon's thin atmosphere, cutting off escape. Lyra stood behind his chair, clutching the backrest, her silver eyes wide. "They are here for me," she whispered. Ethan didn't look back. "They'll have to go through me first," he said. Her small fingers tightened on the chair. "You can't win against them," she said, voice shaking. "Maybe not," Ethan replied, "but I can make sure they never get you." He powered down most systems to hide their heat signature. The ship hummed quietly in the dark outside. Searchlights from the black ships swept across the crater. Dust rose in shimmering clouds under the pale moonlight. Ethan knew they were seconds away from finding his ship. He turned to Lyra. "Listen, kid," he said. "I can't promise we'll be safe, but I can promise I won't leave you behind." Her lips trembled. "You promise?" "I promise," he said firmly. Something in his voice seemed to calm her. Even as the danger closed in, a faint thud echoed through the hull. Ethan's eyes flicked to the sensor panel. "They've landed on the hull," he muttered. Lyra's grip on the chair tightened through the thin atmosphere. They could hear the dull clang of boots moving above. "They're trying to cut through," Ethan said. Already grabbing his blaster, he opened the weapons locker, pulling out a second, smaller pistol. He held it out to her. Lyra shook her head quickly. "You don't need to shoot," Ethan said, "but keep it in your hand. And point it if you have to." She took it hesitantly, holding it with both hands. The sound of metal tearing filled the ship. A beam of light sliced through the top hatch. Ethan took cover behind a console. The first black-armored soldier dropped down into the corridor. His helmet gleamed under the red light, his rifle sweeping the room. Ethan fired first. The shot sparking against the soldier's chest plate. The impact threw him back against the wall. More soldiers dropped down, the small ship filled with the sharp crack of blaster fire. Lyra crouched low, staying behind the co-pilot's seat. Ethan moved fast, aiming carefully, using every piece of cover he could. The air smelled of ozone and burning metal. One soldier lunged toward Lyra. She screamed, raising the pistol. A sudden burst of white light flashed from her hands, not from the gun, but from her. The soldier staggered back, armor smoking Ethan's. Eyes widened. Lyra stared at her own hands in shock. I didn't mean to, she stammered. We'll talk about it later, Ethan said quickly. Pulling her behind him, the last soldier retreated up through the hatch. The ship went silent, except for the hum of systems. Ethan locked the hatch again, sealing it with emergency clamps. They'll be back, he said. Lyra looked at him, her face pale. They will bring more. I know, he said. That's why we're leaving. They hurried to the controls. Ethan powered the ship to life, engines roaring in the thin air. The Silver Wren lifted off, dust swirling around them. The black ships gave chase immediately, their engines glowing red. Ethan twisted through the low mountains, trying to use the terrain as cover. Laser fire lit up the sky around them. A near miss scorched the right wing. The ship shook violently. Lyra held on to the armrest, eyes locked on Ethan. You said you wouldn't leave me, she reminded him. I'm not going to. He said, his voice steady. They reached open space, but the black ships were still behind them. Ethan glanced at the fuel gauge low. He tapped the console, pulling. Up a star map, there's one place they won't follow, he muttered. Lyra tilted her head. Where? An old friend, he said. But we're going to have to trust him. Hours later, after a tense flight through empty sectors, the Silver Wren approached a hidden dock built into an asteroid. It was dark, with only a single blue light marking the entrance. They slipped inside, the heavy blast doors sealing shut behind them. Waiting there was a tall, broad-shouldered man with grease-stained clothes. Varric, Ethan said, stepping down the ramp. The man's sharp eyes moved from Ethan to Lyra. You're in trouble, he said flatly. Ethan smirked without humor. Nothing new. Varric gestured for them to follow, inside his workshop. The air smelled of oil and metal shavings. So? Varric said, why are you dragging a kid around with bounty ships on your tail? She's not just a kid, Ethan said. She's under my protection. Varric's brow rose. You claimed her? Ethan nodded. Varric swore under his breath. You realize what that means? I'm starting to, Ethan said. Lyra stood close to Ethan, listening quietly. Varric leaned in, lowering his voice. You're protecting the last of her bloodline, he said. The ones hunting her aren't just slavers, they're trying to wipe her people out. Ethan glanced at Lyra. Her small hand found his, and in that moment, he knew the promise he'd made was no longer just words. It was something he would keep until the end, no matter the cost. The asteroid dock was quiet, too quiet. Ethan didn't like it. Varric was in the corner, working on a small engine part, his hands moving with practiced ease. Lyra sat at a workbench, swinging her legs, trying to stay calm. But Ethan could see her eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. You're safe here for now, Varric said without looking up. Ethan frowned. You sound too sure about that. Varric shrugged. I built this place, so no scanner in the sector can find it. Ethan didn't reply, but he had lived long enough to know no place stayed hidden forever. Lyra leaned forward, resting her chin on her hands. I don't like hiding, she said softly. Ethan glanced at her. You'd rather be out there getting chased by bounty hunters? She gave a small shrug. At least out there, I can move. Ethan almost smiled at her boldness. Almost. The heavy steel door at the far end of the workshop slammed open. Ethan spun around, blaster in hand, a group of armed men stepped inside, wearing black armor without markings, the same kind of armor the bounty hunters had worn. Varric froze, his hand still on the engine part. "Friends of yours?" Ethan asked sharply. Varric didn't answer. That was answer enough. One of the soldiers stepped forward. "Ethan Cross," he said, voice deep and mechanical through his helmet. "You have something we want." Lyra's small body went rigid. Ethan took a step in front of her. "You'll have to be more specific," he said. The soldier tilted his head slightly. The girl, Ethan's grip on his blaster tightened. "She's not going anywhere," he said. The soldier raised a hand. 3 more soldiers moved forward, rifles aimed. Lyra's hand gripped Ethan's sleeve. He could feel her shaking. He took a slow breath, preparing for a fight. Then Varric spoke. "Ethan, you can't win here," he said quietly. Ethan turned to him in disbelief. "You called them, didn't you?" Varric's eyes didn't meet his. "I'm sorry, but I'm not dying for your fight." Ethan felt a surge of anger. "You just sold out a kid," he said, his voice low and dangerous. The soldiers moved quickly to grab Ethan, twisting his arm and knocking the blaster away. Another pulled Lyra from behind him. She kicked and fought, but she was small. They dragged her toward the door. "Ethan," she cried, her voice breaking. He struggled against the men holding him. "Let her go," he shouted. The soldier at the door looked back. "Not until she's delivered." They shoved Ethan hard against the wall, knocking the air from his lungs. By the time he recovered, the door was already closing. He heard Lyra's voice one last time. "I'll come back to you, Dad." Then she was gone. Ethan stood there, chest heaving. Varric kept his eyes on the floor. "You made a mistake," Ethan said coldly. Varric muttered something about survival. But Ethan was already moving toward the weapons rack. He grabbed a rifle and slung it over his shoulder. He didn't care how many men it took. He was getting her back outside. The black-armored soldiers loaded Lyra into a small transport ship. She kept struggling, her silver eyes blazing with defiance. One of them muttered, "She's a dangerous little thing." Another laughed. Not for long. The transport lifted. Off engines roaring, Ethan ran into the docking bay just in time to see it vanish into the stars. He turned to Varric. "Where were they taking her?" Varric hesitated. "Ethan, where?" Ethan barked. Varric swallowed. The collector. Ethan's blood went cold. The name was known across systems. The collector was not just a slaver. He was a legend of cruelty. If Lyra was taken there, it meant she was going to be sold too. The highest bidder. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Get my ship ready," he said. Varric's eyes widened. "You can't be serious. The collector's fortress is, I don't care." Ethan cut him off. "She's my daughter now. Ours." Later, the Silver Wren cut through the void at full speed. Ethan sat in the pilot's seat, eyes locked on the nav display. The coordinates to the collector's sector glowed on the screen like a challenge. He checked his weapons, his fuel, his plan. Truth was, he had no plan. Just one goal: bring her back, no matter what it took. In the distance, a massive shadow loomed in the darkness. The collector's fortress. It was built into the side of a dead moon, with jagged towers and docking. Arms stretching into space. Dozens of ships circled it like predators. Ethan's hands tightened on the controls. Somewhere inside that fortress, Lyra was waiting. And he intended to keep his promise. The Silver Wren drifted closer to the collector's fortress. Its jagged towers rose from the dead moon like claws reaching into space. Ethan's hands gripped the controls. His jaw set. He had no backup, no plan that would survive first contact. But he had something stronger than any weapon. He had a promise to keep. Docking ships moved in and out of the fortress, freighters, transports, and sleek black vessels that could only belong to bounty hunters. Ethan kept his ship's ID masked. The false signal would buy him a few minutes before anyone realized he didn't belong. A voice crackled over the comm. "State your business," Ethan answered without hesitation. "Delivery for the auction." The docking clamps took hold. The silver wren shuddered as it was pulled into the belly of the fortress. Ethan's pulse quickened. He reached under his seat and pulled out a compact blaster. Checking the charge, then he took out a small data chip and slid it into his wrist. Come. If he was going to get Lyra out, he might also destroy this place before he left. The air inside the docking bay was thick with smoke and fuel. Dozens of armed guards moved through the space, herding slaves toward heavy blast doors. Ethan's eyes scanned every face, searching for Silver Eyes. He didn't see her, not yet. A guard approached, his voice gruff. "You're not on the manifest." Ethan smiled faintly. "That's because I'm not supposed to be here." Before the guard could react, Ethan slammed the butt of his blaster into the man's helmet. The guard crumpled to the floor. Ethan dragged him behind a stack of crates and stripped him of his armor. It was heavier than he expected, but it would get him past most checkpoints. Moving through the fortress felt like walking into the jaws of a beast. The walls were black metal, the corridors narrow and dim. He passed auction pens, where aliens of all kinds sat behind energy bars. Most looked away, beaten down, but one pair of eyes, silver, bright and defiant, locked onto him. Lyra. She was in a small cage, her wrists bound in glowing restraints. A guard stood beside her, talking to another in a language Ethan didn't know. Ethan walked up, his armor hiding his face. The guard glanced at him. "What is it?" Ethan didn't answer. He stepped closer, then drove his fist into the man's gut. The second guard reached for his weapon, but Ethan fired first. The shot hit center mass, dropping him instantly. Lyra's eyes widened in shock. "Dad?" she whispered. Ethan pressed a finger to his helmet where his lips would be. "She," he said softly. He pulled a small tool from his belt and deactivated the restraints when her hands were free. She threw her arms around him. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. Ethan pulled back just enough to look her in the eye. "I told you," he said. "I'm not leaving you." They moved quickly. Ethan led her through the corridors, keeping his stolen armor on to avoid attention. But the fortress was alive with movement guards rushing toward the auction hall. Alarms beginning to sound. Someone had found the bodies. "We have to hurry," Ethan said. Lyra nodded, matching his pace despite her small legs as they reached the docking bay. A massive figure stepped into their path. The collector, he was tall, his face hidden behind a mask of silver and black. His voice was deep and almost calm. "You came for her," he said. Ethan raised his blaster. "And I'm leaving with her." The collector tilted his head. "Do you even know what she is?" "She's my daughter," Ethan said without hesitation. That made the collector pause for a moment. There was silence. Then he laughed, cold, humorless sound. "You think you can protect her?" The collector asked. "She is worth more than fleets, more than kingdoms. That's why I'm keeping her," Ethan said. He fired first. The collector moved fast for his size, drawing a blade that hummed with energy. The blaster bolt missed, striking the wall the next second. The blade sliced through Ethan's weapon. Sparks flew. Ethan shoved Lyra behind him. His only weapon now was his fists. The fight was brutal. Ethan dodged a swing, then slammed his fist. Armored shoulder into the collector's chest. The giant barely staggered. The blade came again, grazing Ethan's side. Pain burned through him, but he didn't stop. With a sudden burst of strength, he grabbed the collector's arm and twisted, forcing the blade away. Then he drove his helmet into the man's masked face. The impact sent the collector stumbling back. "Run!" Ethan shouted to Lyra. She darted toward the silver wren, her small feet pounding the metal floor. Ethan turned and followed, blaster fire chasing them from all sides. They reached the ramp, diving inside just as the engines roared to life. The docking clamps released. The ship shot out into space. Weaving between turret fire, Ethan's side burned from the wound. Lyra was beside him, her hands gripping the seat. "You're hurt," she said. "Not as bad as they are." He replied with a faint smile. The fortress shrank behind them. Ethan. "Set a course for deep space." Lyra leaned against him. "I told you I'd come back for you," he said quietly. She closed her eyes. "And I told you," she whispered, "you are my dad." The stars stretched endlessly outside the cockpit. The silver wren glided through the black, its engines humming softly. Ethan sat in the pilot's seat, one hand on the controls, the other pressed to the wound in his side. The pain was sharp, but he ignored it. Lyra sat beside him, wrapped in a blanket, her silver eyes watching him closely. "You should rest," she said quietly. Ethan shook his head. "Not until we're far enough that no one can follow." She tilted her head. "Will they come again?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "They won't stop. Not as long as you're alive for a moment." She was silent. Then she whispered, "Maybe I should go away so you can be safe." Ethan turned to her sharply. "That's not how." "This works," he said firmly. "You're mine now, Lyra, and I'm not letting you go." Her lips trembled. But she didn't cry. Instead, she reached out and touched his hand. "You keep saying that," she whispered. "That's because—" "It's true," he replied. Something passed between them in that moment, a bond neither of them could put into words. A faint beep from the console broke the silence. Ethan glanced at the screen. A cluster of small ships was on the edge of the scanner. Not bounty hunters this time. These ships bore the crest of Lyra's Peopleland, ancient emblem of silver wings. Over a star, Lyra's breath caught. "They found me," she said. Her voice was hard to read, part fear, part hope. Ethan adjusted the scanners. The ships moved slowly, cautiously, as if unsure what they would find. The crackled unknown vessel. "This is the Royal Remnant Fleet." A voice said, "By ancient law, you are carrying our princess." Ethan looked at Lyra. "Do you want to talk to them?" he asked. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not yet," he understood. "Then I'll talk," he said. He pressed the come button. "This is Captain Ethan Cross," he said. "She's safe. And she's staying with me." There was a pause. On the other end, human, the voice said carefully, "You are claiming guardianship under foreign law. Do you understand what that means?" "I do," Ethan replied. "It means she's my daughter. And no one takes her from me." The line went silent for several long seconds. Then the voice spoke again, softer. "Protect her well, Captain Cross. For if she lives, our people live." The fleet turned away, disappearing into the darkness. Ethan exhaled slowly. Lyra stared at him. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I wanted to." He replied. Hours passed in quiet. Ethan plotted a course to a hidden Sector 1 he knew from old smuggling runs. It was a place where they could disappear for a while. Lyra curled up in the co-pilot's seat, her breathing slowing. Ethan watched her for a moment. It was strange, he thought, how quickly someone could change her life a few weeks ago. He had been just a cargo pilot drifting between jobs. No one waiting for him, no reason to stay anywhere. Now, every decision he made was for her, and it didn't feel like a burden. It felt right. When Lyra woke, she asked, "Where will we go next?" "Anywhere we want," Ethan said with a faint smile. "Anywhere they can't find us." Her smile was small but real. "As long as you're there," she said. "Always," he promised. They shared a quiet meal in the galley, just ration packs and tea. But to Lyra, it was a feast. She laughed softly, telling him about the stories her mother used to tell. Stories of great kings and warriors who stood against impossible odds. "You're like them," she said suddenly. Ethan shook his head. "I'm just a man with a ship," she smiled knowingly. That's what the stories always say at the start. Later, as the ship drifted toward the edge of known space, Ethan checked the sensors one last time. No pursuit, no signals, just the quiet hum of the engines. He leaned back in his seat. Lyra climbed into his lap without asking. Curling against him, her small hands rested on his chest. "You're warm," she murmured. He chuckled softly. "Guess that's my job now." The stars outside seemed endless. Ethan knew danger would find them again sooner or later. But he also knew that when it did, he'd be ready. 'Cause he wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for her as she drifted back to sleep. She whispered, "I love you, Dad." Ethan's arms tightened around her. His voice was low but certain. "I love you too, kid." And in that moment, surrounded by the silence of space, Ethan Cross understood that his life would never be the same again. He had been a wanderer, a pilot with no home. But now he had something worth more than any ship, any treasure, any star. He had a daughter, and together they would face whatever came next.